Yo, what's up, everybody? Happy Friday. It's your boy Game Time Ty. Uh, as you can see, today we're going to wrap up the NFC West. We still do have another NFC division to go, NFC South, but we're going to save that for a conversation that we bring Matt back on. Matty Boots is not here today. That's fine. We'll do the solo, but feel free if you're in chat. If you want to throw some questions in there, we'll react to stuff live. We can look some stuff up together. It'll be nice, fun conversation. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Seattle Seahawks. This is a team that a lot of people are really hot on this year. We saw what Geno Smith did last year. He defied all logic. Nobody expected him to be anybody. And, last year he finished fantasy wise as like a top seven, I think even maybe top five guy. So, you know, we know he's capable of putting up stats. Let's look at what his stats were. So he had almost 4,300 passing yards. That's incredible. Anytime you break that 4K mark, you're in the upper echelon of NFL quarterbacks when you talk about passing. And then the 30 touchdowns. I mean, that's got to be in the near top five of passing touchdowns last year. The interceptions. I mean, 11's a lot, but the ratio is still pretty decent. 30 to 11, not terrible. 60 QBR, above 60 is solid. You know that. Everybody knows this. So let's see what his actual game to game totals were. A lot of passing attempts. We like to see that. A lot of times he's getting over 30. 30 here, 44 here, 30 here, 30, another 31, 34. So, and late down the stretch, he's playing games and they're staying in it. So, they're winning against teams like the Jets, who were really good last year and will be better this year. Obviously the division game against the Rams. I mean, those are always scrappy, but the fact that the Seahawks are kind of in the top of their division there with San Francisco, you're going to see this team put up a lot of points, especially with a defense that's really not that good. So obviously that means good things for the passing attack and the offense altogether. Excuse me. So I like Geno Smith a lot. Honestly, his ADP is pretty low. People probably aren't expecting him to do what he did last year, which is kind of weird to me. Despite people being really hot on the Seahawks this year, Geno is not getting the respect when it comes to ADP. I mean, again, he finished as like a top seven, top five guy last year, depending what your league scoring was like. So eh, for him to be going at the QB 16, it's kind of a little bit disrespectful to me. I still believe, despite this low ADP. I actually he'll outperform that. There's no question about it. You might see as we get closer to the year starting, this number going up because people just like are coming to their senses about Geno, right? Like they're realizing why are people so low on him? He'll probably start getting reached on in other, drafts where folks are maybe a little more savvy, or you'll start seeing that trend potentially. And so in the next couple weeks we might see Geno's ADP change. Keep an eye on him. Definitely a steal where he's going in drafts right now. So if you're drafting tonight for some weird reason, and you're not going to wait for stuff like the Devonte Adams news, stuff like that can happen all during preseason, leading up to the season. So, yeah, that's a big name guy. We hope he's okay. Obviously, Devonte is a tough guy. I think it was just probably just a really hard hit. Keep an eye on him. He'll hopefully be fine. But again, if you have savvy drafters that are reaching for Geno, and all of a sudden his ADP changes towards the end of the preseason, just keep an eye on that. Um, totally totally somebody who I'm like keeping my eye on, and is a value pick. Like I said, where he's going right now. Their run game, let's take a look. Obviously, Kenneth Walker was spectacular towards the end of last season. He finished the year with over 200 carries, almost 230 carries, 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. looked incredible. Definitely, a top 12 guy, top 15 guy. He, I think, was banged up. Obviously, he missed maybe the first game of the season, but um, came on and played pretty consistently, throughout it after he started getting the workload. He came on a little slow, and then, like I said, towards the end of the season, we all saw him, carry that backfield and finish with three back-to-back-to-back 100-yard plus rushing yard games. So I mean, he doesn't get super involved in the passing game. We don't see his totals too high. I don't know if that changes this year. They did draft a young guy named Charbonnet, who is primarily a pass catching back, even though he also is kind of like a big bruiser type guy. He's a big guy coming out of college. I really like Charbonnet. He's definitely somebody to keep an eye on. I don't know what his ADP is, but it's definitely pretty high. Like you look at that RB39, he's going around guys like Rashad Penny, Brian Robinson Jr., Jamal Williams. Um, People are definitely pretty high on Charbonnet. I get it. If he does kind of take a step in this backfield to be kind of the Robin to Kenneth Walker's Batman, because I don't think Kenneth Walker's going to be the full workhorse back here. Like Seattle's definitely a team that likes to utilize a multifaceted backfield. So, our running back by committee, we've all seen it before here, and this is going to be more of the same. So that means good things for Zach Charbonnet. But again, like you're going to get him at RB39. I mean, that's round 10. Round 8 to 10 in most drafts. So that's kind of a little high. You want a guy like that to be immediately playable unless you've already built running back depth on your team. So, depending on your draft strategy, Charbonnet will maybe get involved right off the bat. I wouldn't count on it. I think it will be the Kenneth Walker show for the most part for the first couple weeks while Charbonnet kind of gets his legs under him in the NFL. But if he comes off hot, like if he comes out hot, right out of the gate swinging, don't be surprised if he's got more value than Kenneth Walker. But they will both, I believe, be great pickups. The problem is Kenneth Walker, his durability, right? His groin is apparently progressing. That's nice to hear. But we know he's somebody who in the past has potentially had problems staying on the field. At least he started last year coming off an injury. So you never want to see that. You want your guys going into the year, fully healthy. You can, at least have the most confidence on them, especially if you're drafting them at the positions that you're drafting them in. Kenneth Walker going at RB15. That's super high. I'm worried about that ADP. Probably would go for guys more like Jahmyr Gibbs, Joe Mixon here, Aaron Jones even. Like, even though the Green Bay Packers, which we discussed with Maddie the other day, there's a lot of question marks on that team. So Kenneth Walker, I think people are overdrafting him. But if he, that's really just you're drafting him at his ceiling, at his peak of what you think he can do. And sure, if he comes out and is healthy and stays on the field, we hope all players are that way. He could definitely perform at this level, but it's worrisome to see him go around other guys that personally I would probably snag a guy like even Lamar Jackson, who I'm higher on this year, because I feel like if I have that draft composition where I'm gonna take that quarterback in the early rounds, because I've maybe grabbed a Derrick Henry or a Chubb or somebody early, and I don't need that running back depth, I'm doing that. That makes more sense to me than picking up a Kenneth Walker. So really not much to say about the running game other than Kenneth Walker's a little too high valued in my opinion. Zach Charbonnet is going right around where he probably should, but he could easily outperform his ADP. So, that's something to keep an eye on. DJ Dallas will maybe get like 1 or 2 touches here and there. He's really just more of an insurance, type of situation for depth. We've seen what he does in the past with, the limited opportunities he does get. He's pretty flashy, quick, small guy, but nobody to really think about at all in drafts right now. Their passing game, let's talk about that. it's dynamic. We talked about Geno Smith. We saw the numbers he put up last year. I believe he can do it again. And a direct benefactor to that, clearly, is DK Metcalf, right? A beneficiary. So we see 90 catches for over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. Incredible. Like that's it's hard to ask for more than that, uh, especially in an offense where there's more than one just mouth to feed, right? Like um, 1,000 yards out of the 4,200, 4,300 that Gino passed for. Well, there's other guys on that team that got the other 3,300 yards or whatever it is. So it's there's a lot of mouths to feed here, but he's still a major target, major part of this offense. Clearly was very durable last year, even though like we've seen him have injury problems in prior years. So that's good to see that he's maybe gotten a hold on that. He's maybe protecting himself a little bit more. Not putting him. Maybe Gino has developed as a better passer, giving him safer places to catch the ball and so forth. So um, let's look at these totals. He's getting a bunch of targets, and he's pretty efficient with his catches. So you see random games where it'll spike and he won't be super efficient. Apparently, Atlanta was kind of a tough matchup for him, but you still see 10 targets, 12 targets, 8 targets, another 10, another 6, another 9, and 15 here. And that amounts to not always a lot of yardage. It seems like he's kind of like hit or miss when it comes to his yard efficiency. But we know just from the eye test alone that DK Metcalf is an explosive, dynamic player. For whatever reason, and maybe this is because of the Tyler Lockett factor, he hasn't been utilized maybe in like the deep game as much as we thought he would be because he was a burner coming out, of college, and still is. So not to mention he's just a beast. So similar to like a Debo Samuel type guy, he just do it all. So we'll see if they decide to uh, grow his role a little more. I mean, Tyler Lockett, he's a little older. Let's talk about him. Is he going to be able to be the guy we've seen in the past? I mean, he's always been solid. He's 30 now. But with Ty Lock being 30, you could see DK Metcalf kind of like taking a little bit more of a wider role. Maybe they take more shots to DK downfield. So Ty Lock doesn't have to be always that like threat. So we'll see. That's the I think that is something that's a question mark, but it's an interesting question mark that I'm intrigued in. I definitely want to see how this offense develops and progresses because despite it being kind of a tough division, except for the fact that you have the Cardinals in this division, which we will get to, but you still have teams like the Rams with their defense isn't terrible. You still have Aaron Donald, who's like one of the best defensive players literally ever to play the game. And they did lose Jalen Ramsey. Their defense is definitely not good, but it could give you problems in tight games like we saw down the stretch last year. So and then you have the 49ers, which are obviously one of the greatest teams in the league and definitely like one of the top NFC teams, let alone the NFC West. So um, the Seattle Seahawks will have their work cut out for them. But despite that, I think their team has a great enough offense with enough weapons that we've seen perform at a high level that we think are going to all take a step forward this year. So I think they're up to the task. But Tyler Lockett, I mean, his efficiency was pretty nice. 84 catches, over 1,000 yards, the 9 touchdowns is awesome to see. He's going in areas in the draft where, he always kind of just slides, like he'll finish at like a top 20 wide receiver, but he's always going around wide receiver 30, which is very interesting to me because I guess it's just like we maybe the respect factor isn't there because he's just not flashy, and when he does, pop off, it's potentially there's a hit or miss factor with him. He doesn't feel like he's a very consistent player, but we'll see the actual stats here. So in recent history, we have seen him have field, staying on the field, right? Staying healthy. Despite that, though, last year, he played most of the season, if not the entire season. And, like his totals were pretty up and down. I mean, he did have stretches where he would have, 100 yards, 76 yards, 91 yards, 100 yards, and then he would dip down to 17 yards, 45 yards, only 63, 67, 42. So there were times where maybe he didn't perform at the level that you were hoping, but when you draft him down at wide receiver 30, I mean, this obviously he's performing at a higher rate, a higher level than that, right? We see his stats. So unless you think he's going to take a step back this year, which he very well may, but if you really believe that, then sure, either avoid him, draft him at his ADP. If you need another wide receiver, like your second or third wide receiver off the board, sure, go ahead and get Tyler Lockett. You're not going to be too upset about getting a guy like him. But, I understand why people would feel a little tentative because of just his volatility. He doesn't feel like that you can count on him week to week. So in a pinch, say week 5 or week 6, when you're playing against Arizona Cardinals and you're like, I'm expecting, yeah, that team is bad, right? And the Seahawks clearly should win that game, and they did, 19-9. But he only got 2 catches and on 17 yards, no touchdowns. That is not going to do good, anything for you. It's not going to do any good for you in the game like that on week 5 or week 6 when, every win counts. We know in fantasy, like, every win counts. And if you're going to remember, if a guy doesn't show up like that, that's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth. So, you can't have performances like that and instill confidence in people. You always want there to be some type of floor. And I think we've seen, Ty Lock have kind of these really low, through the floor kind of performances, especially in key moments. Like, for instance, this is championship week right here. He has 2 catches for 15 yards. I mean, if you're a Ty Lock owner in a championship situation, you're relying on him as your wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. Maybe he's a flex because you have a good team, but you're still playing a guy like Ty Lock. You can't you can't feel good about a 2 catch performance. You're just never going to feel good about that, right? So if he's capable of doing that, I understand why people are scared of him. I don't want to spend too much time on Ty Lock. I still like him. Not just because he's we share a name or anything like that, but he's always been consistent enough to where you'll take one of those games from him. Hopefully your team makes up for it. But there are times where he'll pop off, he'll carry your week, he'll get you 25, 30 points on like 125 yards and a touchdown, maybe 2. So like we've seen him do it. It's just like, his ADP, the risk is baked in. And, if you want to go and get him at wide receiver 30, that's fine. It's not a terrible pick. You might even see him slide more than that. So if you are playing chicken with Tyler Lockett and you're like, I'm not going to get him yet. I'm not going to get him yet. He falls to like, round 8. Go ahead and get him because that's an actual value pick then at that point. Don't be afraid to pick him up if he slides just a little bit. It's worth it. We can't move on from their receivers without talking about their rookie. This guy, Jackson Smith and Jigba. What a boss, first round pick. Let's check out some highlights for him because he definitely is somebody who I think is going to pop off this year, especially spelling his name wrong. Especially if like I said, that passing attack takes a step forward. He could end up being somebody who takes over a little bit of the Ty Lock role, or at least of the deep threat, the burner threat that Ty Lock was, and you start seeing a lot more versatility, or at least diversity when we're talking about Geno spreading the ball downfield, right? Because if DK becomes a burner, like we know he can, if this guy, Jackson Smith and Jigba, turns into the guy who, again, like he's a speedster. He's kind of a Ty Lock protege. Like Ty Lock is the prototype for this type of player. I'm excited about this young guy right here. That passing attack, they're going to have to throw. I mean, we looked at the totals. Who's going to catch the 4,300 yards from Geno Smith? And we've seen in the past, we just talked about this the other day. Rookie wide receivers can come into the NFL and just step into a role right away. It is possible. There's like it's all about talent, and it's also all about football IQ, how well you adapt. And some of these rookies, they got good heads on their shoulders as on top of the talent, that they've, been blessed with or have worked hard to obtain. And guess what? They're immediately impactful in the NFL. So, other than the highlights that I've seen, I'm not sure if I know enough about this kid, Jackson Smith, but hey, there's always a shot, and people are taking shots on rookies, every single draft. And look, you're going in wide receiver 36, so people obviously expect them to do something. And this is not just like speculation based off of like public opinion. No, these are professional fantasy pros rating these ranks right here. So if Jackson Smith and Jigba is ranked as the wide receiver 36, there's obviously a reason for that. So I believe, just not only because we look here on the depth chart, he's clearly shown as a starter. He's going to get worked in right away. There's really not a lot of depth behind this, these top three here. So that like somebody's going to have to catch the ball there. Ty Lock, if he's dealing with an injury, undisclosed, apparently, he handled some drills. That was 3 days ago. I'm sure he'll be fine. But, he's getting a little older. Maybe they want to reduce his workload. And maybe that's obviously the reason why his ADP is a little lower. But Jackson Smith and Jigba will, if he, can actually adapt, will step into a role right away. I'm excited about that. I would probably wait to take him though, because that is a pretty high shot, that you're pulling. Wide receiver 36. You're talking about you're in the 8th round there. I'm still looking for guys I can rely upon right away. I don't know if Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be a guy that I can rely upon right away. So I mean, we'll see. We'll see when that happens. It's obviously an awesome prospect. It's exciting. But we'll move on. Noah Fant, real quick. Came over from Denver last year. Didn't do too much. I think it's probably just because he was still learning this offense and, still working into kind of the fold and gaining chemistry with Geno Smith. But hey, he's a talented guy. He got 50 catches last year. I think that's around the middle of the pack when it comes to tight ends. You expect that number to go up a little bit, I think, so that, in return, we'll get a little bit more yardage. And 4 touchdowns, not terrible. You could see that number go up based on just the fact that his receptions will go up. He'll get some red zone targets. I believe they'll also give him some design plays up the seam, chunk plays down the field, because he is an athletic dude. And usually, when you see athletic tight ends like that, there are design plays, and like the Travis Kelce's of the world, the George Kittles of the world. I don't think Noah Fant is as dynamic in terms of like an all-around tight end. He doesn't probably block as well as like a Kittle does. Kittle is literally just like the best blocking and pass catching tight end when you talk about the full package. And Noah Fant, despite maybe him not being as good of a blocker, I'd say when you talk about pass catching ability, when you talk about route running ability, he's right up there with the George Kittles and the Kelce's and the Delaney Walkers. Because Delaney, we can't forget about him. I think he's not someone to even look at this year, but just in terms of the comparison, I mean, he's one of the most talented, dynamic, acrobatic, tight ends that we've ever seen. So, Noah Fant, somebody who could take a step forward this year. As far as ADP, with Noah Fant, let's see if, okay, there we go. Looks like he's going for free. He's literally not even being drafted. He's off people's boards. This frankly to me is the prime opportunity to just not draft a tight end and then see a guy like Noah Fant waiting, at the bottom of the draft or even, you don't even draft a tight end and you're honestly waiting, and please don't do this, but you're waiting, for preseason hype to show up on somebody and then pick somebody up off the waiver wire for week 1. Noah Fant's probably going to still be there, any 10-person, 12-person league. I mean, he's tight end 32. I don't know how that's possible. If there's 32 teams in the league and he's one of the starting tight ends on one of these teams, you're telling me he's going to be bottom rank of all of those starting tight ends, I just don't believe that. So, based off what we saw last year, yeah, he might have finished as the tight end 32. Very, very possible. But as far as what he should do this year, I don't see why there's so much disrespect on a guy like Noah Fant when there's so many other dudes that are going ahead of him that are kind of bigger question marks to me. So again, if you want to go zero tight end, reach for a quarterback, get a Patrick Mahomes or somebody, you're probably not going to get both Patrick and Kelsey. And honestly, if you did something like that, you're probably not going to have a lot of depth at wide receiver or running back. So, I mean, pick your poison in that scenario. But if you decide to draft a no tight end, no tight ends in the entire draft, and you want to go on the last round, pick up a guy who's just laying there, type in Noah Fant in your search bar and snatch him up and just start him on, in the first week. He'll get you 3 to 4 catches, maybe 40 yards. And honestly, for a guy that was free, he might even get you a touchdown, which would be just money right there. So I don't know why people are so low on Noah Fant. Good for me because I'll probably end up with a lot of really, really, value plays from Noah Fant this year. So I'm moving on. I'm moving on to their defense. Their defense is bad. Um, don't expect a lot. That actually is good for their offense, like we've discussed in previous episodes. We like those scenarios. Good offenses, bad defenses, great for fantasy. Um, don't start them. Obviously, start against them. Start your guys against them. But that's how we wrap up the Seattle Seahawks here. Moving on to pretty much the laughing stock of the entire NFL right here, right now this year. It's the Arizona Cardinals. Um, Man, I feel bad for all the Arizona fans out there. Like, trust me, there was a time, as a Bengals fan, where we were the laughing stock too. So I feel your pain, and I'm here for you. If you want to talk, if you want to chat, if you want to reach out, please, utilize this opportunity to get all this stuff off your chest because it's tough. It's tough. So Kyler Murray, yeesh, yeesh. Is he even going to play this season? We really don't know. Like it's honestly whether it's because of his injury or because of just like the insane falling out that has happened here in this team. With the Cliff Kingsbury situation and just probably how like the locker room. When DeAndre Hopkins leaves like that in the fashion that he does, that doesn't instill a lot of confidence in the rest of the locker room. For a guy like Kyler Murray, because that was very public in terms of that was very visible in terms of how the relationship unfolded with Kyler and DeAndre Hopkins. So if I'm a guy in that locker room right now, I need to see so much from Kyler Murray to even get me close to feeling good about him being my starting quarterback, right? So that's why we're feeling better about Colt McCoy. But again, you're talking about Colt McCoy. And so if Colt McCoy's your quarterback to start off the year, you're probably not going to have a lot of success with a lot of these guys when it comes to fantasy. Colt McCoy is not a guy we've seen who's known for his high level quarterback play. He can be serviceable in a pinch potentially, but he's not a light him up guy. He's not throwing a bunch of touchdowns per game. In fact, he's going to throw more interceptions than touchdowns. Clearly, I mean, it's not a huge sample size, but that's what you're looking at, right, with a guy like Colt McCoy. And so that doesn't, despite the fact that maybe I, as in the locker room, would probably rather have him right now than Kyler Murray, at least from what I've seen from Kyler. Like I said, Kyler's a talented guy. If he shows me that he wants to be there with the team, that could change on a dime. That could flip, and all of a sudden he's won the locker room back. And so that I want to be an optimistic person here. That could totally happen, but that's up to Kyler. That's literally up to him. And if we don't see that, and if in the next couple weeks I'm not hearing good news out of Arizona camp, specifically relating to Kyler Murray, that team is dead to rights to me this season. I am hands off. I am not going anywhere near. Maybe you grab a guy like James Conner because he gets the volume. And when he gets volume, he performs at a decent level. Like last year, sub 200 carries, didn't even hit 800 yards. The 7 touchdowns, pretty decent. and I think he even missed some games last year as well. But still, you want a guy to be a little bit more productive and efficient than that when you're, talking about the number one running back on a team, even a bad team. We've seen number one running backs be productive on bad teams before, in terms of fantasy. But like you're drafting James Conner at the RB 25, and that to me is you're counting on a guy like that to produce right away. You know what I mean? Like he's your RB2. He's literally your RB1 in some cases if you went like quarterback, wide receiver, or some crazy, dumb strategy like that. But like I I'm looking at the guys around him right now. Obviously, we don't know what's going on with Dalvin Cook, but wherever the hell Dalvin Cook lands, I'm getting Dalvin Cook over James Conner. I'm getting DeAndre Swift over James Conner here. I'm picking up even if if I'm a little wide receiver heavy and I want to take some shots on some other guys like James Cook or actually James Cook. Don't take a shot on James Cook. Please don't take a shot on James Cook. Like a Samaje P Ryan or other guys later on because I passed again on a running back in this round to go and get a guy like Mike Williams or Brandon Ayuk, who's we'll talk about later. He's a guy who I'm excited about this year, but I'm not excited about James Conner. He's not a guy who I look at his name and I'm excited. I'm not. He doesn't do it in that way. So like, uh, again, his stats, he'll get you 10 plus carries. Clearly, the volume is not like a top tier workhorse running back. They had guys like Chase Edmonds, and obviously Kyler Murray was also taking carries, as a mobile quarterback last year. But once Kyler was out of the picture, it seemed like it was James Conner show, and so again, I'm low on this entire team. So, every single take right now has to be taken with a grain of salt. It probably isn't all doom and gloom here. They're still NFL caliber players on this team that will perform, to some degree. They want to get stats. They want to play to the best of their abilities. They want to show that even in a losing situation, quote unquote, garbage time, that they are going down with a fight. They're not just going to roll over and die, right? So you might see big blowouts happen, and down the stretch, they're just turning around and handing off to a guy like James Conner because they don't want Colt McCoy throwing a third pick of the game. You know what I mean? They're just going to try to grind out the clock, and the guy who's going to be their clock grinder, well, guess who that's going to be? That's going to be James Conner. You know what I mean? So, go ahead, draft him. I'm not drafting a guy like James Conner. I'm staying clear away from that guy. But you're going to hear me say that about a lot of the guys on this team, except maybe a Marquise Brown. Um, Hollywood Brown is one of those players who he's just so exciting to watch. His speed is top 5 in the NFL, top 3 maybe. He's one of those guys who he hasn't been as reliable when it comes to his catching. We've seen and maybe this led to his departure in Baltimore, but he was dropping passes that when he was wide open, it would bounce, right in his breadbasket, bounce it off his hands, and like it would just that would have been an open touchdown if he had caught that. I can't tell you how many times. I think I saw it like twice in one game. With Lamar Jackson and him back in Baltimore, even one season, it was just like the body language on Lamar was just awful. And so, like I said, I think that might have led to his departure. But we've seen him do other things that are spectacular. We've seen him blow by 2 safeties, while the ball's in midair, catch it in mid stride and take it to the house. I mean, he only had 3 touchdowns last year, but he definitely had flashes. We know he's a dynamic guy when he's given an opportunity. He obviously was the number 1 receiver, for the entire beginning part of the season while DeAndre Hopkins was suspended. When DeAndre came back, we did see a little bit of a dip in his targets, and then obviously he did miss some time there. But regardless, with the volume, it seems like he is able to make things happen. This team will be a very tough team in the red zone in terms of they will struggle in the red zone. So I'm not excited about that. But if there's anybody on this team who's going to be getting the touchdowns, other than maybe like the James Conner, it's going to be Marquise Brown. It's going to be because he's open downfield. and Colt McCoy's taking a shot on him, or when Kyler comes back, they're taking shots downfield because the season's over and they're just basically constantly in from come from behind games, and they're just like in pass heavy offense. They're throwing 40, 50 times a game. Because they just because they're paying Kyler, and maybe they just want if it's a unsalvageable season, they probably want to develop chemistry with their guys. And if I'm the coach there, I'm probably going to want to look towards the next season and work on things now. You know, get those mistakes out of the way now. If our season's kind of lost because we've lost 10 games, we lost 10 out of the 12 games or whatever in the last 5 games of the season, we're like, all right, fuck it. We're just gonna go in and we're just gonna work on the schemes and all this stuff for the next season. I could see them taking a bunch of shots. I could see this team actually be, maybe surprising people late down the stretch. It turning into a pass-heavy offense, like I was mentioning, and guys like Marquise Brown are just getting open constantly, and in garbage time, putting up like, you know, 15, 20, 30 fantasy points. So obviously that's a lot to say about a guy who you probably don't want to draft already. Let's see where our boy's going. Wide receiver 32, that's still kind of high for me. I think like despite what I just said about his potential towards the middle towards the end of the season, when Kyler potentially comes back, I still don't trust this offense. I still don't trust what's going on in that locker room. I have to see it first. So maybe I'm willing, if I see it turning around, towards the middle part of the season, at least I'm seeing rumblings of it because not everybody's going to be paying attention to to the same degree, and so you might see something with the Arizona Cardinals that other people are missing. Maybe the person who has who drafted Marquise Brown, who was expecting him to do a lot at the beginning of the season, is not stoked on the fact that he probably has been underperforming with the Colt McCoy situation, and you're like, hey, I'll give you a trade. And then you benefit from the fact that you just bought low on a guy who now Kyler's coming back. Obviously there's some savvy players out there. I'm sure it's going to be tough if somebody's drafting Marquise Brown. They're probably fully aware of the risk factor, and are banking on the fact of Kyler coming back. But if for whatever reason you can convince somebody to trade him to you because you didn't want to draft him because he was too risky, and I totally get it, that could be a play. So don't forget about things like that. Obviously, always keep in mind, like I was saying, you want to win each and every week, and at one at a time. And so if there's a nice situational matchup, or that somebody's going to be coming back in the next couple weeks that's going to increase the value of a certain player, and you want to go ahead and trade for that guy, those types of plays win fantasy leagues every season. I guarantee you, please do not overlook stuff like that. Because Marquise Brown could end up being a league winner if he's on the right team at the right time of the season. So, anyways, I don't want to talk too much else about more about the Arizona Cardinals here. The Zach Ertz situation is a little questionable. Keep an eye on him. Just know that he's a talented player, but again, like it's the Colt McCoy factor. It's the fact that he's had injury trouble in the past. And Rondell Moore. Before we move on, I will say, um, this kid kind of gets a little bit of a bad rap, or at least he's kind of been given a bad situation. Very, very talented, super dynamic coming out of college. Obviously, they wanted to utilize him more in the offense. He kind of had a little bit of struggle, in his he was struggling a little bit in his rookie season. But last year he performed pretty well at times. There were times where he was getting 10, 13 targets a game. Then he got hurt. So, obviously, looking forward into his future, if he takes a step forward as a high draft capital type of player who they want to be involved in this offense. They have nobody else. They have fucking Greg Dortch, Zach Pascal, Andre Bocellia, and the like. They're gonna need a guy like Rondell Moore to step up and be the sort of like Batman, or the Robin to Marquise Brown's Batman. But you don't have a lot of size on this team. Like you're looking at here, maybe Greg Dortch is no, Greg Dortch is not big. He's 5'7". So you got guys 5'7", 5'7". Marquise Brown, my guy, 5'9". You have no size on this wide receiver core. I'm actually concerned how, like, unless they're just constantly burning defenses, it's going to be hard to get these guys open in the middle of the field where you can actually, throw to them reliably and have their catch radius come into play in a positive way. Because, frankly, 3'5'7", 2'5'7" guys and a 5'9" guy doesn't instill a lot of confidence. Man, I'm not tall. Like I'm 5'11" myself. I was a short receiver. I wasn't like the tall, lanky guy. I was a small burner. But you can't all be like that. You literally can't. So I'm worried about that. And that's all I'll say about this team before we move on, because time's ticking, and I want to get to these 49ers. But first, we're gonna talk about the Rams. Um, Worried about the Rams? I'm a Bengals fan first. I'm obviously from LA. Go Doyers. But Rams are my like second team, in my back pocket. And when they're doing well, it's great. When they're not doing well, man, like it's LA. People just kind of disregard bad teams in LA. Sorry, Clippers fans. Even though when the Clippers were good, motherfuckers were still disregarding y'all. So that's neither here nor there though. Um, we're looking at Matty Stafford coming back from last year, having been basically injured the entire season. He played through injury the season before that, when they won the Super Bowl. Came back this season, or rather last season, with not the best stats. Right, he didn't play great when he was back, and then clearly he got injured and then just couldn't finish the season. But he's getting up there. He's 35. He's 35. He's not a spring chicken anymore. He could be dealing with other ailments that we don't know of, because that's just who the guy is. He's a tough guy. He doesn't like to complain about stuff, even if that means not telling your training staff that you have a little tweak in your throwing shoulder, or something going on in your in your calf or your ankle or something like that. So but when he's on the field, he's good. We've seen him play well. He's the gunslinger, obviously. His ratios were really bad last year when he was on the field. He threw for 2,000 yards despite that. All I know is that I'm looking at this situation not because I want to draft Matt Stafford. I don't want to draft Matt Stafford in any leagues at all. I'm actually looking at the situation because I want to maybe draft a Cooper Kupp high in the first round. And that's completely, Cooper Kupp's success is largely reliant on whether Matt Stafford plays. And frankly, if I'm going after Cooper Kupp with the top 5 pick, top 6 pick, top 7 pick in some cases, because maybe people are sliding on him, but he's going high. I mean, we see people getting him as a wide receiver 3, 5th pick overall, fifth on sleeper. He's ranked number 5 there. So, I've seen people in mock drafts go get him at pick 3, go get him at pick 2. If they believe that we can rely on a Matt Stafford to put up the numbers that we've seen from Cooper Kupp in the past, where we're not far from removed from when he was literally the top scoring wide receiver, or sorry, fantasy player in the league, just like 2 or 3 years ago. So, I mean, Cooper Kupp can do that. He did get hurt last year. It wasn't just the Matt Stafford thing. He got banged up, and I think missed a lot of time because of like an ankle or something like that. He's coming back, but right now there is a questionable tag on him, and we're gonna actually just check that out here real quick, because I'm actually kind of worried about why there would be a questionable tag on him. So it looks like Cooper Kupp was mic'd up at practice. Okay, whatever. Says he's hopeful 3 days ago. Sean McVay held another training camp practice on Tuesday without Cooper Kupp. Head coach Sean McVay told the media that he was hopeful that the All-Pro receiver would be able to return soon. Okay, so as far as having younger players is Nakwa. Okay, whatever. So it's clearly not being super reported on. It's definitely something to keep your eyes on as we get closer to the start of the season. Draft season is right upon us. So if you're going up and getting a guy like Cooper Kupp, like he is a first round player, right? Like if we think he's going to play at the level that we know him to play at, he's obviously worth picking up in the first round. I mean, there was a world where I would have picked him up 1-1 if I knew for sure that Matt Stafford was going to be healthy and going to be good at the beginning of the season. And I think because of that question mark, that's why I'm not even picking up Cooper Kupp, obviously based off of Cooper Kupp's health as well. But like, I think Matt Stafford is a bigger question mark in my mind to the Cooper Kupp, success than actual Cooper Kupp's health. I'm more convinced that Cooper Kupp will be healthy to start the season than I am that Matt Stafford will be there for the entire year or just be as good as we've seen him in the past. Like again, he's 35 years old. Not a lot of quarterbacks stick around for that much longer. Maybe we've seen guys like Tom Brady and now Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning got up there. Brett Favre obviously was playing pretty deep into his into his career, like past 40 plus. So, but those guys that we've named are elite dudes. Not taking anything away from Matt Stafford. He's obviously a Super Bowl winner. He's definitely somebody who I believe will potentially be a Hall of Famer. Maybe not first ballot. I don't know. You could probably make an argument he could be first ballot. Just the amount of numbers he put up. Back in the Megatron days. That said, uh, I'm worried about his longevity, his health, his durability, and if Matty Stafford can't be on the field the entire season, that's not good for Cooper Kupp. So that's a lot to say. Just keep an eye on Cooper Kupp's health. Also, you're taking a little bit of a risk, with this team. This will not be a good team. Even if Matty Stafford and Cooper Kupp stay healthy and can play and perform at a high level together, this team will still probably be losing games. This team will still probably be struggling, to stop teams from scoring on them. And that also means that they'll be in shootouts, which is actually a good thing for Matty Stafford and Cooper Kupp because hopefully he'll be throwing a lot. But again, like we don't know if his arm is durable enough to sustain a 40 throw a game clip. Like Matty Stafford's 35. We'll see. Okay, I'm going to move on from that point. But uh, Van Jefferson. Um, Van Jefferson is obviously somebody who I think is worth keeping your eye on. Like he's somebody who, let's see here, uh, going for free in drafts. He's the number 2 receiver on a team that's going to have to throw the ball a lot, right? We just talked about how they're going to be in shootouts, aka they're going to be coming from behind a lot because teams are just going to score on them and be running up the scores. Van Jefferson is going to be a large part of that offense. Like he's going to have to be. So when we've seen him in the past, like obviously he was banged up a little bit last year. We saw some volume from him in spurts. There are games where he had 5 targets, 6 targets, seven targets. For some reason, he never got over 3 catches at all, which is a little unfortunate. But in years prior, especially in his rookie season, when he came out and nobody kind of like expected much from him, but we saw flashes of him. He just ripped one down the field, and instead of Cooper Kupp being under the ball after when you see Matty launch it, it was this guy, and you were just like, oh wow, okay, well, I guess go show your stuff, young blood. Like that's pretty awesome to see young guys take the steps up like that. So when they step up like that, so um, we've seen him do it. If he can get back to that form that we've seen him perform at. And this team is taking shots down the field, and it can't just be Cooper Kupp, right? If that's how they decide they want to use Van Jefferson, um, that's exciting. That's an exciting prospect. You're getting a guy like that for free. He's technically a sleeper in that respect. Even though people still kind of know of him, he's clearly listed as the number 2 receiver on the depth chart. But we saw his ADP. He's not being picked up. As far as ADP is concerned, that's a sleeper. So, worth keeping your eyes on Van Jefferson. But I know he's been in that category in the past. So it's hard to trust that. Maybe you want to take a shot on a more flashy guy like, Jackson and Jigba or, Smith and Jigba or somebody like that who we just looked at. Fine. But you're going to pay a little bit more for that shot. And it probably will pay off potentially, but Van Jefferson is right in that conversation of like that number 2 wide receiver on a team that has to pass a lot. Is he going to step up? He has an opportunity to, and like don't sleep on Jefferson. Okay, that's all I'm saying. If you don't be the guy who's like, or the girl who's like, hey, I didn't draft Jefferson, and it's week 1, and he caught 2 touchdowns, and he had like 60 yards on like 5 targets or some shit like that. He just ripped 2 off or something. Like like don't be that person. So um, there's probably going to be a lot of people out there. I don't see him getting drafted a lot. I don't see him getting picked up until we see it first. But if you're that person who's savvy enough to, see the future, and a lot of times you're just rolling the dice, on these situations. But sometimes they pay off, man. And when they do, it's so sweet. It's so sweet. We kind of brushed by Cam Akers. Um, Not because I'm not a fan. It's really just because we've seen this backfield get hairy in the past. It's a hard conversation to have, despite the fact that people are actually saying there are reports coming out of this camp that Cam Akers looks committed. Cam Akers looks better than he ever has. His attitude is great. The relationship between him and Sean McVay, is coming back to a positive place, from where it was, in previous seasons where there was like some rocky tension there. So there's all this stuff is positive. We're hearing a lot of positive stuff come out of LA right now when it comes to Cam Akers, in this offense. So let's see what he did though. 188 carries, 786 rushing yards, 7 touchdowns. Pretty, decent efficiency. He was, above that 4 yard per carry average, which is, just we look at that as like the standard in the NFL. You want your RB1 to at least have 4 yards per carry, right? Like that's a big number. But the volume was there. Like when it really mattered, it seems like they handed the ball off to him. They lost a lot of games, obviously, last season. The Rams were not good. They were in situations where they probably had to throw a lot more than they wanted to. They had to get away from the run game. But if we look down the stretch, he had 17 carries, 12 carries here. He's getting 65 yards, 118 yards on 23 carries, 123 yards on 19 carries. When we last saw him, and he was healthy, right? Down the stretch, he was healthy. He was coming off, an injury before, but he played, the majority of the season. He looked really good. We know that he is capable of playing at a high level in this league. Their schedule. Let's take a look at their schedule. I'm actually interested to see, despite this division being pretty tough, they actually might have a rather light schedule. So, okay, week 1 they're playing against the Seahawks. That's going to be a shootout. That's going to be a shootout, right? Like Cam Akers gets involved in the passing game. Like maybe not as much as you'd like. Obviously, let's be real. That's actually not involved at all. But if there's reports of it happening, right? Like if there's whispers of it happening, that's only a bonus. But you're not picking up a guy like Cam Akers because he's involved in the passing game. Like you're really just picking him up for his rushing potential, and hoping that they utilize him in the way that they have in the past, at least in the past few weeks of last season, right? So you have a 49ers matchup there. That's going to be a tough matchup. They have a great defense. I'm a little worried about Cam Akers in that matchup. Against the Bengals, that's going to be a shootout as well. Cam Akers could get maybe 1 or 2 touchdowns in that game potentially, if they really needed him to. Against the Rams or against the Colts, Rams should beat the Colts. Rams should win that game. Eagles is a tough matchup, but Cardinals, very winnable game. Steelers, winnable. Cowboys, I'd say that's winnable, depending on the Cowboys. Cowboys are a huge question mark right now. So you have an up and down schedule here, with the Rams. Where Cam Akers is going, RB22, I am not mad at that draft position. If he needs to be your RB1 because you went a quarterback, wide receiver, or something in the first 4 rounds, and he needs to be your RB1, I mean, you're probably not happy about it, but I think you'll be fine in the long run, as long as Cam Akers stays healthy, as long as that team, keeps all of its weapons healthy as well. Like that, the Cam Akers success is very dependent, on the Matty Stafford and the Cooper Kupp situation as well. So, like if those 2 guys go away somehow, or even one of those guys goes away, the Cam Akers value drops a lot. So, I mean, I know you can make that argument for a lot of teams in the NFL. Every season, there's situations where stuff like that happens. But I think that's baked into his ADP. I think you're not going to be mad. There's not a lot of competition. when you're talking about the backfield here, Kyron Williams, we've heard in camp that he, either hasn't been super performing well or also was getting banged up. I know here it shows that there's no problem with him. He's obviously active. There's no questionable tag or anything like that. But Kyron Williams is not a threat in my mind to the Cam Akers situation. There's nobody here who I'm looking at and I'm like, oh, okay. Uh, I'm worried about Cam Akers' longevity in this offense, not just in terms of his health or anything like that, but in terms of somebody waiting in this backfield to take his job. Like that's not happening here. Cam Akers is, I think, good enough to lead this backfield. Maybe you'll see other backs get worked in. You'll like we've seen that in the past. That's what Sean McVay likes to do. He likes to utilize three, two, three, four running backs sometimes. Get everybody going in. See who the hot hand is. We saw that with Darrell Henderson. And Sony Michel when Cam Akers was still there too, and you would never know at 1 week to the next if it was going to be Darrell Henderson, if it was going to be Sony Michel that gets those touchdowns, if it was going to be Cam Akers, because of, for some reason, Sean McVay wasn't liking Cam Akers that day. That all of that has been put to bed, I believe. That is not part of this conversation anymore with this backfield. So that actually makes me feel a lot more confident about picking up a guy like Cam Akers, who is going kind of lower than he went in previous years past. At least last year, I feel like he was a little bit higher in terms of his ADP going into the season, than where he is now. So RB22, you're drafting him as an RB2 there. He could end up being somebody who's like on that cusp of an RB1, as long as all things go well with that team. I mean, but that again is that risk is baked into his ADP. You can't trust it all season long. You don't know if that team's going to be competitive or not. People are kind of low on that on these guys right now. I don't know what the Vegas odds are. I think they're not slated to go positive though, just because of the competition within that division and within not necessarily the NFC, but like probably because their schedule is pretty hard as well. So we'll gloss over their tight end quickly. Tyler Higbee. My goodness, I mean, like we've seen him do it before, and we've seen him play at a very, very high level. We know that when this team is clicking and when this team is playing in shootouts, Tyler Higbee is a large part of that offense. 72 catches last year. That's like top 20%, I'd say, of tight ends. Like you don't see a lot of tight ends getting those numbers. 620 rushing, receiving yards. That's really good. Definitely have to be happy about that. No matter what tight end you have, you see those numbers. That's going to be a steady floor for you to just continue to just plug him in every single week. You don't want to think about having to go to the waiver wire and looking for another streamer because you've got a guy like Tyler Higbee that you can just plug in and rely on week in and week out. That said, he's going as the tight end 16. So people are kind of disregarding him a little bit. I believe it's because the tight end landscape is so foggy right now. We don't know who's going to be the that one or two tight end that steps up into the top 5 or top 6 tight ends, because there's always a new couple every year that do it. Obviously, you're going to have the main top 3, at least for the last 3 years. It's been Kelsey, Mark Andrews, and Kittle, right? Those have been your essentially your top 3. Maybe you throw Hawkinson in there. People are really high on him this year. But Tyler Higbee is someone who easily could take a step into that top 5, top 6 conversation because he has the talent, because he is getting the usage within that offense. Like I said, we've seen it before. We've seen him as long as he stays on the field. I'm not sure. I don't think he's had like super hardcore injury issues. Not like a guy like Tyler Eifert or anything like that. So Higbee is somebody who you can definitely go and grab late in drafts. I'm not a proponent of reaching for tight ends. So I'm more than happy to, in round 12, round 13, round 14, whatever it may be, grabbing a guy like Tyler Higbee and just being, happy with plugging him in, getting 8, maybe 10 points, and then, per week. And then if he catches a touchdown, you got yourself a pretty solid week, like 16, 15 points there. So Tyler Higbee is that kind of player. We've seen him do that. Obviously, last year he was pretty solid. But again, like last year was a down year for him. And that's saying a lot. So if you're saying, if he's going to come back and play better because Matty Stafford's going to play better, Cooper Kupp's going to be playing better, that whole offense is going to be playing at a much higher efficiency and much higher rate than they were last year, because obviously last year was a down year, then sign me up for Tyler Higbee in the 13th, 14th round. Like straight up, I'm more than happy to pick up a guy like that. Real quick, their defense, ignore them. Don't pick them up. In fact, start guys against them. If you see, you got a juicy matchup coming up against the Rams, and you got a guy like Debo Samuel or something like that, or maybe Ayuk. If he's for some reason not on your starting lineup for some reason, even though Ayuk is definitely like a wide receiver 2, 3 at this point, go ahead, start them up against the Rams. They're gonna ball out of control. Rams are gonna let up a lot of points this year, and it's not gonna be pretty. But that's a good, nice segue there to the final team in this this division here, San Francisco 49ers. Probably probably because I'm an LA fan, and I definitely can't sit here and glaze up this team, but without feeling bad about it. But man, this team is gonna be good this year, and I am saying that with like through my teeth. I'm gritting my teeth. I'm not happy about it. This team is gonna be good, damn it. And you know what? It doesn't even matter if it's Brock Purdy or Trey Lance or Sam Darnold starting, at the quarterback position. This team is going to put up points. That's just what these guys do. The Shanahan is a phenomenal coach. We know he's a brilliant offensive mind. And frankly, what I saw from Brock Purdy last year, just in the few games that he played, I mean, look at his QBR. He's out performing in terms of efficiency and his rating guys like Geno Smith, guys like Dak Prescott, which is all that impressive. But guys who are people who we're looking at this year as like their top 10 quarterbacks. So Brock Purdy is literally in that conversation just based off of having played for the few games that he played last year. We're not even talking about Trey Lance anymore as the guy in San Francisco because of Brock Purdy and how well he played last year. I mean, we have to understand that's not a small thing that he did, as a seventh round pick. Now, I'm not going here and saying like, I know better than Shanahan. The eye test shows me that Brock Purdy's a much better quarterback than Trey Lance or even Sam Darnold from what we've seen from both of them. Even though Sam Darnold in the recent years has taken steps forward, but like even with such a small sample size, if this guy and people in the locker room are saying that it's still an open competition for this quarterback room right here, if the locker room says that, I believe that. But I know all of us here are sitting at home and thinking like, why the hell not? Would it be not Brock Purdy that's starting? Why would you not start Brock Purdy? This year. So it's a no-brainer for me. I like that it's a competition. I think it's good that he's going to feel a little bit of the pressure. It's not just a given for him who's, he's not just walking in this year as like the starter. I think that competition will make him better. But let's not kid ourselves. Brock Purdy's going to be the starter of the San Francisco 49ers this year, week 1, right? So that I think is good news because Trey Lance is a rushing quarterback. Sorry. Trey Lance is somebody that they do design plays for in the red zone. So that hurts guys like Christian McCaffrey. That hurts guys like Debo Samuel, like George Kittle, who would be red zone targets, or that would take away from their red zone potential. So I like that it's a Brock Purdy instead when you're talking about other guys on this team. So let's start off with Christian McCaffrey. He's the 1-1, right? People are picking him up 1-1. Or, sometimes Justin Jefferson, but it's those two. And maybe you talk about Jamar Chase being in that conversation. Obviously, we covered it a couple days ago with the Joe Burrow thing. That kind of maybe hurts the Jamar Chase factor a little bit. And so you're more likely to go for a guy like Christian McCaffrey or Justin Jefferson in that 1-1 position. But I got to tell you, with his usage from last year, 244 carries on 1,100 yards and 8 rushing touchdowns. That was just his rushing. Already, that's like a top 15 running back, top 10. Then you talk about his passing, so or his receiving. So 108 targets, 85 catches. I think the only running back who had more targets and more catches last year than him was Austin Eckler, and we saw how many, how involved he was, and we know why people are so high on him this year. But it's hard to pass up a guy like CMC. I mean, let's just keep this conversation short because frankly, I could go on all day about how great of a player he is, how dynamic he is, how involved he'll be in the running game and the passing game. Like all these things we know. That's why he is being projected to go as the 1-1. I'll just say this. Pray that Brock Purdy keeps this starting quarterback job, and it's not Trey Lance. Like I said, there's like a 90% chance that it'll probably be Brock Purdy. But just like if we're going in week 1 and it's still unsure, or Trey Lance gets named the starting quarterback, Christian McCaffrey owners out there everywhere are feeling really bad about having Christian McCaffrey on your team, with Trey Lance potentially being there to snipe your goal line looks. So anyways, Elijah Mitchell, questionable. Not worried about him at all in terms of if he's going to be a threat to Christian McCaffrey's workload. Obviously, hope he gets healthy. He's definitely a dynamic player that they like to utilize in this backfield. Shanahan's somebody who likes multiple backs, similar to the Sean McVays, where he'll ride the hot hand. Obviously, they traded and grabbed Christian McCaffrey, so we know at least CMC has that starting role. But they still will work guys in, and once Elijah Mitchell gets healthy, yeah, he will be a part of this offense. We might see that happen with Jordan Mason or Tyron Davis-Pierce right off the bat. But like I wouldn't worry about drafting any of these guys. They're really just handcuffs or backup, collateral damage, insurance for CMC if he potentially goes down or something. Obviously, we never want to see that. But like that would be the only scenario where any of these guys would be relevant. Which is not really normal when you talk about the San Francisco backfield, because we've seen multiple guys come out of San Francisco at the same time that have been relevant in this backfield. So moving on to George Kittle, I mean, it's it's hard to even talk about him because he does the same thing every single year, right? Like he just goes out, he's that head down, lunch pail, clock in, clock out kind of guy. Like he's you know what he's going to do for you, and he does it consistently, and he does his job well, and he's a huge part of this team. And frankly, like you're just never upset with fielding a guy like George Kittle. Frankly, he's obviously I think he's been drafted lower than he has been in previous seasons. His ADP right now is tight end 4, which I mean, obviously that's still pretty high. We've seen him go higher than that though. We've seen him be like the tight end 2. Sometimes even like there was a year where it was like him or Kelsey as the tight end 1. Obviously, we're a little bit far removed from when Kittle was that good, but he's still going as a tight end 4. He's still a guy that like, you look at his numbers from last year. He stayed on the field a lot, which is something that we have seen him, maybe struggle with a couple seasons past. But he'll get you, 5 targets, 4 targets, 6 targets, and he'll catch a bunch of those. Get you some yardage too. There's games where he's getting 98 yards, 84 yards here. 93. So he has a high ceiling. Maybe his floor is not as great as say a Kelsey or even maybe a Hawkinson this year, or Mark Andrews. We've seen Kittle not show up. Like there are times where he'll get you 1 catch for 21 yards. That's a week that you're like, damn it, like why did I draft you in the 4th round if you're gonna do this? You know what I mean? But again, the tight end landscape is so barren, and there are not a lot of guys out there that have the kind of the ceiling upside that George Kittle has. With the 6 catches, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns. I mean, that's a week winning performance, and that's late down the stretch too in the season. In fact, that was probably during championship weeks for a lot of people, or at least semifinals, for a lot of people. So, that wins you that week and propels you into the championship week, and you're stoked about that, right? From a guy like George Kittle. So, because you drafted him to be that. And that's like a Travis Kelce performance. So not a lot of guys can do that when we're talking about tight ends. So clearly, he's being drafted as a guy who does that. Like I said, there's still that risk of him going, and getting one catch for 21 yards. But that's with most tight ends, honestly, in the league and in the entire league. And frankly, I'm willing to go get a guy like George Kittle if that's my prerogative and I don't want to think about the tight end position for the rest of the year. I just want to plug a guy in and forget about it because that position is a fucking shit show. Fine. You know, just know that you're gonna have to be a little savvy coming on. In these late, towards the middle of late rounds, you're gonna have to make those picks count. You're gonna have to get some value guys because going and getting a guy like George Kittle that high will leave your team with some deficiencies, whether that's at quarterback, whether that's at running back, wide receiver, whatever it may be. That's the risk that you go and you take when you go and get a tight end that high. Okay, fine. Moving on. It's weird that they are not showing the wide receivers here. Can I, excuse me, ESPN, like to file a complaint. We don't have wide receivers on the San Francisco depth chart. All right, so we know who they are, right? The relevant cast here is Debo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. So we're just gonna manually go check them out here. Debo Samuel, my goodness, what a beast he is. He had a real bad down year last year. Obviously, I think he was banged up, towards the middle part of the season last year. Definitely missed some games. Um, he's a baller. Like, what can I say? Last year, he even admitted it himself. He was in the worst shape of his career last year. He was like, I look disgusting. Like, I mean, this is him, not me, like saying that, but he said himself, like, his words, and I'm paraphrasing, like, he's like, I looked like, like I looked gross or something to that degree, right? And you never want to hear a guy who looks as good as him say that about himself, because, like, dude, I'm jealous of, just shut your mouth right now, sir. Like, you look great. But we are talking about professional athletes here, and if he knows he's not at the peak physical condition that he could possibly be in, and he knows he can get better, and he felt it, in his play and in his body, and saw it in his route running and film. He wasn't as quick here. He wasn't as sharp there. I mean, that's music to my ears. If a guy acknowledges that, worked all off season, to basically reverse those, that situation, and he's sending, Kyle Shanahan pictures of himself. I'm sure everybody here has heard the reports of Kyle Shanahan saying, like, hey man, I've never gotten, this many shirtless pictures from a dude before. It's like, like that. Honestly, in a weird way, it gets me excited. It sounds weird to say that, but like that makes me excited a little bit about Debo Samuel, because if we think that this team will have Brock Purdy as their starting quarterback, and Brock Purdy is a pocket passer, right? He's not a running quarterback like Trey Lance. He's a guy who wants to get the ball out, to his guys, and let them, do work downfield in the middle of the field. And we've seen Debo Samuel be a top 10, top 5 performing fantasy wide receiver in his past before. We're not far removed from that, right? Debo Samuel was right there in terms of touchdown rate, with Cooper Kupp that one year. So it was, in this, he only had 2 touchdowns last year. Let's not forget, Debo Samuel was a touchdown machine. He had a nose for the end zone. Not only that, they were just handing the ball off to him, and he was just ripping, rushes off like 30 yards to the house or something like that. Debo Samuel, and you're telling me that guy, is in the best shape of his life in his career. So, I'm pretty stoked about Debo. Like I said, you never want to hear a guy from LA talk so highly about any San Francisco organization or player specifically. But man, the 49ers, like I said, they're going to be good this year, and Debo Samuel is going to be a firm component of that offense, and he's going down here at wide receiver 16. Put some respect on Debo Samuel's name. My goodness, you're going to grab guys like Najee Harris, and Travis Etienne Jr. over Debo Samuel, you're picking up guys like, okay, Chris Olave, great rookie season. T. Higgins, no slouch, but he's the number 2 on that team. Chris Olave is in his second year. They have Derek Carr as their quarterback. You're telling me you're not going to go get Debo Samuel? And you're going to pick up those guys? Like, I mean, okay, no hate to T. Higgins. I think T. Higgins will absolutely perform at his ADP. But I'm telling you that Debo Samuel will outperform this ADP. This is absurd to me right now. But I get it. It's because right now there's still question marks. We don't know who the starting quarterback's going to be. It's not officially Brock Purdy yet, right? Like, there's still a competition there. So there still may be some worry here that like Trey Lance will be the guy, but I'm telling you, please don't sit on draft day and you're staring down guys like Mark Andrews or Breece Hall or Devontae Smith, and you're like, I'm gonna forego grabbing Debo Samuel and go get another one of those guys. Like, God forbid you go down and get Keenan Allen over Debo. Like, please don't do that. Please don't do that. So it's a lot to say. Debo is being severely underrated, and I'm not sure I get it. I think I might be overhyping myself for Debo, but I think I've seen him do it before. He's so freaking good. He doesn't need a lot to do. He doesn't need a lot of volume to do what we know he's capable of, which is just like housing touchdowns. And I think he's that 2 touchdown total from last year, not going to be that. So please don't sleep on Debo. People I feel like are sleeping on him at round 4. Last guy we'll talk about on this team is Brandon Ayuk. I think he's poised to take a step forward again this year. I mean, but last year, let's just be real. He took a step forward last year. He was phenomenal. You got him in like the 10th round last year, maybe the 8th to 10th round, mid rounds last year, and he put up 78 catches, 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. He was the guy who was getting touchdowns for you last year in San Francisco, other than CMC or George Kittle. It was Brandon Ayuk, and like it was in all sorts of different ways. Like, he was taking him to the house, he was burning guys open, he was taking a slant to the house. He was just dynamic in a lot of different ways, and so. Brandon Ayuk is a guy who's like still young. He's only 25. He's a first round pedigree, player. So we know that he came into the league with a lot of expectations. Maybe he underperformed his first couple years, but lately he has been on fire and he's only getting better. It seems that team is good. I keep saying it. I hate to say it, but they are good. And so, he's the wide receiver too. Arguably, I mean, he had more involvement last year, but like I said, than Debo Samuel. But like I said, I don't think Debo's gonna, sit on the sidelines like he did last year. I think Debo's gonna be the clear number 1 in this wide receiver room this year. So, but that still doesn't mean Ayuk won't eat. I mean, if Brock Purdy ends up being a guy who throws for 4,000 yards, Ayuk could easily see these totals, if not a little bit more. But don't be too high on him. Obviously, you don't want to draft a guy like Ayuk a little too high, but he's going as a wide receiver 29. That's value for me, right? Like, he's somebody who can easily outperform that ADP. I don't want to end up with like 3 49ers on my team, but it's very likely just based off of how these ADPs are, with if I'm like 1-1 and I go and get CMC and then Debo's waiting for me in the 4th round and then I'm sitting there in round 7, and I need another wide receiver who could step in, be immediately like valuable at wide receiver 3 or even a flex. I'm getting Ayuk. So it's like, there's a world where I could see myself having 3 49ers on my team, but obviously it's you don't want to stack that hard. Usually if you're stacking that hard, you want like the quarterback involved at that point, but you never want both receivers on a team. I wouldn't even say getting like a Jamar Chase and a T Higgins together, or like a Devontae Smith and an AJ Brown together would be something that's desirable to have. It always kind of feels weird to do that, but I mean, hey, Debo and Ayuk will both be relevant. They will both be, fantasy relevant players who are performing week in and week out. Debo, I think, is, like I said, going to take that huge leap this year. I mean, back to like the elite echelon of what we've seen him do in the past. But Ayuk's going to be pretty close right behind him. He'll be a top 12, top 10 guy. We could be looking at this team or this pair right now, or sorry, at the end of the year, or even in the middle of the year, and saying they're in the conversation for the best wide receiver duo in the league, up there with the A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, with the T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. So that is very possible to see. But that's very reliant, again, on the quarterback play. Brock Purdy has a small sample size. I'm being very optimistic about him, which is strange because, again, San Francisco. But don't sit there and think that this team is just gonna get projected like 12 wins on the season, and then their fantasy players, or their players that are going lower in fantasy drafts aren't actually gonna like contribute to that and be fantasy relevant. So like we have to remember, we gotta put the correlation, we gotta connect the dots. Like if Vegas is high on this team, we should be high on some of their players. Like we have to remember, there is a correlation there. So I think that about covers it. I'm gonna quickly talk about their defense. San Francisco's defense is a top 5 defense in my mind still. They will absolutely, be fantasy relevant in terms of turnovers and potentially like, kick returns, that they run back for you. So just I wouldn't draft them super high, but they are going in drafts. If you're a person who wants to just have a defense that you lock in for the rest of the season, you don't like to stream defenses. You don't feel like that's something you want to have to worry about every, week in to week out. The 49ers defense is a defense you can draft and play year long. Obviously barring any crazy injuries to their star guys, but Nick Bosa is going to be back. They got Hargrave, they got Armstead. They got really good guys on the squad. So don't feel like it's bad if you're gonna just go get a defense because you don't want to worry about streaming every week. Because let's be real, there's probably like 5 defenses that you can really count on, and then you're really just streaming. It's similar to tight end, maybe kickers. So, anyways, that about covers it. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. That was a lot of fun. Next time we will have Matty Boots back. We are going to have a special guest as well. Come on and talk to everybody here about running back contracts and just the state of the league right now, and the players, CPA, the bargaining agreement, all that stuff. So, but once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Please go rewatch the VOD if you came in, middle of this and want to check out our analysis of the NFC West. But yeah, I'm going to upload this VOD on YouTube and some clips on Instagram. So please follow us there and go subscribe. And yeah, anyways, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see y'all later.